What's going on, everyone? Welcome, Rabid here. So there's quite a bit to go through, so I'll just try to go through it fairly fast and just get to the point because I know we all, have bad attention spans. But first, let's start with FW. Looks like it's moving more towards GPU mining. All the ASICs are falling off the network, but that's not quite the case yet. We're also going to look at the Jasminers, and they don't seem to be hashing right. So right now we can see the current DAG on FW is 7 gigabytes. And by the end of next year, so it's going to be gradually increasing from now, well, it constantly always does every few blocks and so on, or epochs. And then, by the time it hits the end of next year at 2027, we're going to be at 8 gigabytes, which means no ASIC will be able to mine this at all. So we're going to start seeing reduction of hash rates, hash rate falling off, and soon the move over to only GPUs that are 8 gigabytes plus. Let's take a look at everything. All right, so let's start with the Jasminers that I got. Here's the Jasminer X16-Q and the X16-QE. So if I scroll down here to the X16-Q, it's also known as the X16-3UQ. This is just the server rack slots it takes, 3U, so it takes 3 of them. But we can see here the RAM is 8 gigabytes. So we still got 1 gigabyte. But remember with ASICs, you need like an extra half a gigabyte for working there. And then, the other half a gigabyte will be there for actually expansion, so it works. So usually around 7.5 you'll probably start to see this lose some hash rate. Coming into the X16QE, this only has 6 gigabytes, so in theory it can't already mine it, or it'll mine at very, very low hash rate because it can't even load the complete DAG. So let's take a look at how these are actually doing. So if we look at profit calculators right now at 12-cent power, mining now has the X16Q. They actually removed FW, which in theory it should still mine, but it's not here. So you can't even look that up there anymore. ASIC miner value does do the same thing. They removed, they got it here from mineable coins, but they're not listing it as the probability with that coin. They're utilizing ETC. And then if we actually come into what to mine, they do have it here, and it's showing about a little over $4 a day revenue before power, or $2.64 is what you should be getting based on your hash rate and power consumptions if this was working 100%, but it's not working. So here we have the Jasminer X16Q on old firmware. Last time I had this thing updated, November 17th, 2023, and we can see we're only doing about 28.3 hashes. This is supposed to have 8 gigabytes of memory, and it should load the entire DAG. Here is the QE on September 11th, 2024. So newer firmware, as it is a newer miner, but it's actually hashing way better according to this. If I actually come into the pool, we can see that the QE is indeed hashing way better than the Q, and the Q is only doing 23.8 mega hash, where the QE is still only doing 143. But for some reason, the QE is hashing way better than the Q. So again, those are old firmware. So the first thing I want to do is update all my firmware to the latest. So I was looking around to see exactly what there is, and it looks like here at jasminer.com. Remember, always use official sites. A lot of times I like to get these firmwares and put them on my website, to make everything in one spot. I haven't done that with the latest one of these, so you are going to have to go to jasminer.com. Maybe I'll update it. We will see. But if not, you can check out rabidmining.com to see if it's there as well. But first, we can see Jasminer X16. This is the throughput quiet server, so the Q version, and it is end of December 2nd of 2024. So the end of December. And then here we can see the quiet economics. So that is the QE, and it's exactly the same. So nothing is changing here. It's probably the same firmware, but I would recommend download each one individually. You don't know if something has changed or something, and you don't want to mess anything up. But the file names and everything are exactly the same as well. So I'm assuming they will work. So I'm going to update my Jasminers, and we're going to see if it increases or boosts or does anything for these. But something weird is going on. Also, before I do, let's just take a quick look at the log here. And it looks like we are getting a nonce error, and it's discarding things here. for a few things. And here we can see capacity 7.3 gigabytes is what it's saying here. Here it loaded 7.7. So again, here it loaded 7.8. So the memory is kind of all over the place, and we are getting nonce errors. If we come into the QE, we are getting, it looks like it's reducing frequency, it's changing its volume around and voltages. I guess that would be voltages, not volume, because it doesn't have any of that. But you know, you can see here's what's going on in the logs here on the QE, and then a back quick screenshot. You guys can pause, take a look at what it's doing here. So now let's jump in, and I'm going to update these, and we'll come back and see how they're doing. All right, so latest firmware here, we can see X16Q. We did get a boost in hash rate from what we're at, 50, 60 mega hash. Now we're sitting at 543, but we're still like, you know, a long ways. We're a gigahash shy of where we should be. So we're still losing a lot of hash rate. Looking at the QE, we're about where we were before. So the upgraded firmware didn't really do anything. 32 minutes, we can see it took to about 11:45 to get that going. It took a lot longer, and here we can see 11:36. So, you know, an extra 10 minutes, almost 9 minutes to get the DEG running on the QE, but we can see it is still mining the same as it did before. Quick look at the log. So here is it's the same thing that it was showing last time on the QE, and now if we look at the log system on the Q, which does have the 8 gigabytes, it's the same thing that the QE is showing now, with reduced frequencies and things like that. So there's still another setting I want to try. So I can't remember when I last tested this. Maybe performance was better than performance ultra. So I'll go to that, and then I'll see how that goes. I also want to adjust the protocol from get work to stratum v1 and see if that does anything. If you remember, there was a big thing going on with ETH coins and stratum v1 versus get work, where get work could get hacked, and there's a whole bunch of vulnerabilities with it. But stratum v1, you'd lose hash rate and it wasn't as good, but it was more secure. So a whole bunch of different things going on here. So, you know, I'm going to try the performance mode, then I will try swapping over to stratum v1 and see if that does anything. But so far it's looking like the Jasminers aren't up to par, even if you have 8 gigabytes of memory. So performance mode on the X16Q is bad. It's not doing very good at all. And performance mode on the QE seems to be the same as it always been. So it's very hit and miss on the Q, and the QE seems like it doesn't matter what you put it at, it's still loading some of the DAG, and it's not doing very well compared to, you know, we're supposed to be over a gigahash on this miner, 1.5 or 4 or something. I can't remember what the QE is supposed to do, maybe 1.7, I think, actually, but we're nowhere near that. So, and it is only 6 gigabytes of memory. So it's pretty bad. All right, so here we are now, X16Q. I put it back to, let me just see here, go into the miner. Stratum v1 back to performance ultra for both miners. This is what we're trying this time, and we can see that our hash rate is back to over 500. It was doing 700 to 800 mega hash at times, but then kind of dropped down. We can't really see that 800 on here, so it might have just been a split second here. I'll go back to auto refresh on, but it looks like we're, you know, that 5 to 6 here anyway. But if we come into the QE, now we're having an issue where, you know, before we were 200 to 300 mega hash, now we're down to how the Q always been. So it doesn't seem to like the V1 stratum on the QE. And then because this was loading the DAG file at 6 gigabytes, I went into the Apollo to see if it would work, because it is a 6 gigabyte machine with 5.8 gigabytes working. And you can see it's been going for a half an hour. It's at 199 get works, and it will not engage mining. So the Apollo V2X is not working in this case. All right, and just to make sure these miners were still working the way they're supposed to be working, I threw them onto Ethereum Classic, and here we can see the X16Q, almost 2 gigahash here, 1.989, and then the QE here, 1.956, almost 2 gigahash as well. So they're both working as intended. Even the Apollo here is rocking 1.27, 1.31 gigahash in that. And then coming into the pool, we can see they're all detected, and hash rate is starting to pick up. So far we're sitting about 3.53 gigahash. Obviously we don't have any average hash rates or anything yet because it's still picking up. It's only been a half an hour. You need a good 24 hours to get that number. But we're sitting at about 3.5 gigahash on ETC. So these miners are working as intended. And for some weird reason, even the 8 gigabyte X16Q is getting major reduction in hash rate. So that could be to do with the working. So maybe it needs, 1 gigabytes or something free. So really it only has 7 gigabytes and it needs 1 gigabyte working or something like that. And it starts seeing that reduction in hash rate. But it's very weird that we're seeing such a huge drop in hash rate. And, between performance mode and everything as well, that performance mode, gave it a little bit of boost over performance ultra on FW, but everything else was kind of, nerfed and stuff. So, there's a lot of different scenarios playing out. It was really weird seeing the two miners side by side like that. So one more thing, which is interesting. I don't know if they changed their website or not, but you can see ethereumpow.org doesn't work. If I click on this link here, it'll take me to this website right here with a connection timeout. But the Explorer and everything does still work based on mining pool stats link, and it has a totally different it's oklink.com and nothing to do with ETHPOW at all. But this is their Explorer, and again, coming and looking at the DAG size, it looks like at about in November here it was 6.85, and that's kind of when we started seeing the network in November of 2025 drop off. Here we can see ETHPOW network hash rate is dropping, but we're kind of seeing the same thing, and November is when ETC hash rate dropped, and that had nothing to do with the DAG size. So maybe miners are just giving up at this point in time, but we are seeing a pretty consistent hash rate drop coming off FW, where we're only sitting at 2 terahash right now when it was upwards of 26 terahash in May of last year. So a lot of hash rate has came off, which means yield should be picking up, but also a lot of these ASICs are no longer able to mine it at much high efficiency levels, and pretty soon there's not going to be any miner on an ASIC side that's able to mine it, because coming towards the end of next year it's going to hit that 8 gigabyte mark. But remember, every epoch that DAG is growing every single day. So right now we can see 7.094. Let's just look at 7.1 for an example. When's it going to hit 7.1? And we can see April 21st of 2026. So April 21st. So that should have actually already happened, but it's saying it didn't because today's the 23rd. So let's just go 7.2 to give you an example. So here we can see June of 2026. So as time goes by, it's constantly growing and growing and growing, which means all these ASICs are going to get less and less hash, which is kind of interesting because now it's going to be moving it more into the GPU side of things, where any GPU at 8 gigabytes plus, like 3060s and stuff, 4090s, 3090s, and so on, with a lot of memory, at least over 8 gigabytes anyway, they're going to see full hash rate, and they're going to be able to mine this when the ASICs come off. So we could start to see GPU mining on ETHPOW pick up in profitability for GPU miners. But, and it is a huge but, is ETHPOW obviously needs a pretty big jump in price. Now, when it comes to, volume and able to sell your coins, there's a decent amount, quite a bit of volume on ETHPOW. So it's no problem to sell any type of mine coins or anything, or if you invest or whatever, it doesn't matter, not financial advice, but we're talking about mining here. It's pretty easy. There's a lot of volume. You can get rid of your coins. But based on, we got 13-second block times, block reward of only like 2, current price and everything, it only has an emissions of $3,960, less than $4,000 per day. So it is not very many emissions there at all. If we want to put that into the grand scheme of things and looking at the size of this coin in terms of emissions, Doge isn't here. Sometimes it's here, sometimes it's not. It's a little over $1 million. We got Zcash at 604, which is technically in third because Doge is in second. We got Bitcoin Cash at 346. $4,000. We're looking at levels around Nexa. In between Nexa and Digibyte. That's where ETHPOW sits. Not very many emissions is out there. The coin doesn't make that much, which means it cannot support that many GPUs once it does move and the ASICs fully fall off, because some people are mining it still on the ASICs. But once this does come into place, you know, we definitely needs a pump to support a large GPU mining community. So far, no coin really has that. The emissions are extremely low on all the coins out there. So that's, you know, kind of up in the air. But if you are paying attention to this, GPUs will be feasible for SW soon, because all them ASICs are going to be falling offline unless, you know, some new ASIC comes out with a big memory boost. And I don't really see that happening, especially with the memory crisis. If they do, you're going to pay for it, and it's definitely not going to be worth it. So let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section on the whole situation with FW, the DEG size increase, Jasminers, and all the ASICs falling off. I'll see you on the next one. Rabid out.